What's going on, guys? It's Coach Gaglione here with another edition of the Powerlifting for People podcast. I'm your host, and we got another
Thank you.
today with Brad, the Bearded Powerlifter. So we had him back on not too long ago. So this episode will air a little bit further out in the future. But I just want to kind of recap and get Brad's last meet because, not only obviously we've been, working together for a long time online. Had a bunch of raw meets. So if you haven't listened to his first episode, I think that would be a kind of a good, just to kind of get a little bit of his background, but did some raw training. You went through a body transformation, you kind of went up and down in weight like myself, even did a show. But you kind of got caught with, you did a wrapped meet, and then now you did your first equipped meet, multiply. So, and for those that, are kind of with not familiar with equipped lifting, excuse me. I think there's kind of a lot of ways you can kind of look at equipped lifting, but the way I kind of look at it, you can look at it like NASCAR, you could look at it like NASCAR versus a foot race, you could look at it, a bicycle versus and I think it was Dave Kirshen that said he kind of compared it to the pole vault and the high jump, which I never heard before, which I thought that was but you're basically using a tool to express your athletic prowess. So I thought that was a good way to explain it that I haven't heard before. But I was using the analogy of like kind of a cyclist versus a runner, because both have to have a lot of endurance. You need to have a lot of speed, athleticism. But again, one is kind of has higher potential, but just because you have a great bicycle doesn't mean you know how to ride the thing. Doesn't mean that you're going to be faster than the next guy. But anyways, I digress. So what I guess made you first, I guess, have the interest in trying the equipment, and was there like a moment where you're like, I'd really like to jump in and train for an equipped meet?
Yeah, so I mean, I honestly, I probably wouldn't not have even done an equipped meet at all had I not been able to train in person with you and the crew in Long Island that we had, because it wasn't part of my world. I've lifted for a long time. I've been in a lot of different gyms. I've never been around any other equipped lifters, just to learn the process, because it is like, the technique of the squat suit and especially the bench shirt is, it's all about lessons learned. And I think being up there with you and Benny and the crew, it kind of accelerated that process for me, because, last year I did a meet in August in reps, and then I did, we immediately jumped into equip training to start prepping for the meet in November.
Excellent.
So,
yeah, and I think that one of the things, and you can kind of comment on this, but one of the things that we do with Brad and what we recommend if someone is looking to get into equipped lifting, I think number one, I kind of gave you some hand-me-down gear that was a little bit looser. It was broken in already. So basically, that's just going to a broken in piece of equipment. It's going to stretch a little bit over time. It's going to be a little bit easier to use, a little bit more forgiving in general. Looser, again, also going to be a little bit more forgiving. There's a lot of people that kind of like say you should start with single ply versus multiply, whatever. I think that you should just kind of get into whatever division, whatever federation that is either local or whatever your kind of crew is training in. I jumped right into multiply myself. I know, there's guys like Travis Rogers, who's kind of dabbled a little bit in both. He did really well with the single ply stuff. Jimmy Kolb's did really well with single ply. Is now like doing incredible things.
Everybody's looking at me.
The banded shirts.
Like, this is the nice lady. I'm like, this is.
I think that you have to also realize that there's pros and cons to each. And just because if something is a tight fit versus a loose fit, but in general, I think sometimes it's more important that you just get a piece of equipment that fits your body and is appropriate for your strength level and your ability level more than anything else. If you get something that's too tight, that's single ply, that might not work as well as something that's looser, that's multiply, and vice versa. You may get a single ply suit that fits you really well, accommodates your body. it may work better. You may get more carryover. You know, there's people that are benching 1,000 pounds single ply. There's people that are squatting 1,000 pounds single ply. So it's not to say that you can't get the same carryover because you can. And even like with the wraps and stuff have evolved quite a bit. So, in terms of like the training, you know, what are some things that you noticed that were like different, like right off the bat, either in terms of the program or in terms of the technique, or even just like how you were feeling?
So the biggest noticeable difference for me was the fatigue level, and it took me a little bit to get a grasp on, because I was doing all my normal stuff that I would normally do for recovery, all my different modalities. I was doing my float tanks, my massages, you know, but I was recovering physically, and that was the part that I couldn't get my head wrapped around. The fatigue was actually coming from the CNS, and it was coming from the, you know, heavier weights. I was, you know, lifting above what my raw maxes were every week, so I was just taxing the central nervous system. And once I, you know, got my head wrapped around that, I changed my recovery modalities. I quit working out as much. You know, I think I took a day or two out of my workout routine. I went down to 3 days a week where I was just working on technique and, you know, the main movements that we were doing. And I was able to start recovering then.
Yeah, I think people, and this is one of the biggest, I'd say, misconceptions about potentially equipped lifting. Just because it's going to potentially give you a carryover, 100% of like your suited squat is not going to affect your body the same exact way as 100% of your raw max, especially in a bench shirt, same thing. So, the suits and the shirts will provide some compression for like your hip joint, for example, in the squat, your shoulder joint, for example, in the bench press.
So we're supposed to have.
There are some things that maybe mechanically, there are some trade-offs where like, let's see a lot of squatters that are equipped to go a little bit wider.
Your welcome message,
like that. You are kind of protected in a sense in certain areas, but since you are lifting more weight, it's more absolute poundage. Not like extra load on your spine if you're not like ready for it. If your body, you know, you get a different kind of systemic stress. So it's really important that you're ready for that, and you need to let your body kind of acclimate to that. It's basically a super maximal load. So, and it's just the same thing if you ever done like really short range of motion training, if you're doing heavy block pulls, pin squats, or heavy walkouts. Just because you're not taking the weight through a full range of motion, you will kind of maybe tend to get some of this brain fog. You may have experienced this as with the first time you started to use knee wraps as well to a degree. It's even exponentially compounded in the suit. But when you start like just loading your spine heavier more regularly, that kind of takes a toll on just your body in general. And I found that, you know, just kind of sleep, rest, recovery. So if you have like a muscle soreness problem, for example, you may be able to walk it off. You may be able to get some blood flow, some 10-minute walks, some active recovery sessions. But in terms of the, kind of that neural fatigue, that spinal loading, I think kind of rest and recovery is, and just kind of, you know, getting more sleep, taking naps. It's really like kind of, and just time is really the only thing that's going to kind of help that. So sometimes, you know, less is more when it comes to recovery, and just kind of making your body adapt to it. And I do believe in my case too, like just being a super heavyweight, having handled 900 and 1,000 pounds in the squat, I feel like my nervous system, my my ability to handle that kind of systemic stress has improved quite a bit. So even though I'm a smaller person, even though I'm not absolutely as strong, you know, my recovery ability is much better, I would say, than I'd say your average lifter of my like strength and size, because I have that experience with that kind of, you know, that extra spinal loading. So in terms of like how it actually felt for you, because I know for me it was kind of almost like a brain fog or something like that. Like, how would you describe like the difference in fatigue and how like the equipped lifting made you feel versus, you know, the heavy raw lifting?
Yeah, the raw lifting, I was still able to, you know, I still had the energy. I wasn't as fatigued. I was sore, you know, but you know, so with the raw lifting, maybe I had to roll a little bit more, maybe I stretched it a little bit more, and then I was good to go. So with the central nervous fatigue, it was all that wasn't doing nothing, because that wasn't, you can't roll out your central nervous system, right? You just have to give it time to recuperate and recover. So a big game changer for me was meditation. So I just in the mornings, instead of going down and rolling and working out, I would, in the basement, I'd go down and I'd meditate, and I'd maybe stretch, do some active stretching, and just take it easy, and give the body a break.
Yeah, you kind of actually just reminded me. So one thing I kind of got out of practice a little bit on, but I'd like to get back into practice. I think that a lot of times as lifters that are a little bit older, like 35 plus, 40 plus, we get very good at figuring out how to prep our bodies, whether that be movement preparation drills, soft tissue technique. Some people call it activation or potentiation or stimulation technique of certain muscles, maybe mobility for some problem areas. But one thing I think is also important too, especially as a equipped lifter, but really just as a heavy strength athlete, a strong strength athlete, is the importance of a cool down. So I'm not sure if I ever mentioned this to you, but it's just kind of, hopefully something too. So, but you just reminded me when you said meditation. So some things that can help you shift from a sympathetic state to a more parasympathetic state. So basically a sympathetic state, for those that are listening, you're basically in a fight or flight mode. So when you're lifting very maximal weights, your body's in heightened state, which can also be neurally fatiguing. So the more kind of you have to recruit, the more you have to go into that sympathetic state. That's going to take a toll on its recovery. So that's also why I'm kind of a big advocate of like maybe not always cranking the music, not always getting smacked in the face, not always hitting the ammonia, because that's going to heighten your nervous system even more. And that could also be, again, give you that extra fatigue potentially. You have more output, but there's a cost to that. The one thing that I found could be helpful, so whether it's doing some gentle, mobility stretches that are specific to your problem areas, maybe going for like a little bit of a light walk, especially after squatting and deadlifting, like the next day after is going to be really important to kind of get blood flowing. It's really going to be healthy for the mind to kind of just get moving, so you don't get overly stiff. But some things that I found helpful to kind of get your nervous system to kind of switch over, bringing your legs above your heart or even hanging upside down. So something like the Donnie Tom. The hanging band protocols, a lot of people use them for distraction of like the hip or distraction of potential, almost like an inversion table in Gaglione. But from what I've learned and read about, when you get your legs above your heart or you go upside down, that kind of helps you shift back into more of a parasympathetic state. So I like to combine some sort of like elevation of my legs, whether that be hanging upside down or going 90-90 on a bench, and then just doing some nasal breathing. So nasal breathing, hanging upside down, diaphragmatic breathing, could be with box, it could be a cadence or not. But that slowing down your heart rate and shifting your body to like a restful state, I think is a really good practice, something I need to kind of get back into. After you hit a really hard workout, it's kind of good to like shift into that, kind of restful state. And I think that could be really important, especially for equipped lifters. So it's just some little tips there. It's something that also as a reminder for myself, because sometimes we're always on the go. And if we're always like in that sympathetic state, that's going to like have a potential negative impact on a recovery, especially when we're talking about like more of your nervous system, which is kind of definitely one of those systems that we're, I think in, in terms of research and stuff, we're still like kind of figuring things out. So a lot of this is like anecdote. A lot of this is you kind of figure out by experience, but nasal breathing, making sure you're not, kind of chest breathing, diaphragmatic breathing, going upside down, having your legs above your heart. Those are some really good ways. And then, yeah, if you're able to do some sort of meditative practice, post training or after your training, I think is really good. And when you're going for your walks, I think that's good for just also helping your aerobic ability. We kind of were talking about a little bit before the call. Because it raises your core temperature, because it really compresses your breathing being in the suit, the bench shirt, your blood pressure is going to be a little bit higher. Your breathing is going to be more impaired. So being able to learn to relax and kind of recover
18 hours a day.
sets in between bouts. So kind of going into like, training and even into the meet, how do those attempts feel like in terms of like, versus a raw lift, like as far as like what it kind of takes out of you and in terms of like, I guess kind of getting through the meet itself. If you want to maybe you can kind of recap the meet and can kind of talk a little bit on how that went and like how do you feel like it was like as far as how it felt on your body. So because because I think you're in pretty good shape for a guy your size.
No, listen, I don't sleep at all. Like
how
the
the
first couple
actual
nights, I think, because I was mad at myself.
contest felt for you
Shame on me.
and the recovery between attempts.
Yeah. So going into the meet, that was a concern for me because I wasn't like I said, I had cut the volume on workouts way back so that I could recover, my nervous system more. So I felt like I wasn't doing as much work as I needed to be at the GPP level that I needed to make it through the meet. And so I think a big game changer to meet for me was, you making sure that after the squat, I calmed down, got my, heart rate down, got into a parasympathetic state and, relaxed before the bench came up. And, surprised, I felt great. I went 9 for 9. Recovery wasn't an issue for me in between, squat, bench, deadlift. I was able, and then like we talked about earlier, it was a quick turnaround at the meet. It was a two flight platform. And, I was looking at some of the other lifters and on the third attempt for deadlift, I was sitting in a lot better spot than the majority of the lifters there. So I felt really good about, the way that the prep going, how we prepped and outcome for sure.
Yeah, so I think the meet went about as good as it could have. Again, I've never gone 9 for 9 since 2006. So I'm still working on getting that feat. But especially go 9 for 9, all PRs. Yeah, I think you could tell me if I'm wrong, but I think all those weights, all those third attempts. I mean, I don't think you've ever touched any of those weights and without like a band or anything. So really good stuff. In terms of the actual preparation, I know we pulled back a little bit on the deadlift to focus on the squat. And that was by design. Anything like in particular in terms of like technical things or programming things that you felt like really helped like the most?
Well, as far as technical things, I think that, we only had like a 6-week window to prep for the meet. So the way that you incorporated the gear, like we kind of talked about in the beginning, the first week or 2 or 3 weeks was all, hand-me-down gear. And, like you said, it didn't really fit, but it fit good enough to where at the bottom I felt it. And, then we threw in a pair of bell briefs, which really don't add much, a little bit of compression, right? And worked those for a week. And then we just, we slowly added, stuff in all the way up until actually the last squat. My last squat was our first time in the squat suit that I used. So, we were right down to, to the end there because like I said, we had 6 windows to prep, 6 weeks to get ready for it. But, so like I said, just having your knowledge and your guidance and, implementing the different pieces of equipment, the way we did, I think really was the
and
game
I think you could comment. I think a lot of times, like I'd say almost every session, you probably had a little bit in the tank every time, and we really focused more on the skill. I'd say, especially in the deadlift, we're trying to push up the squat. So especially when you're getting into equipment, even as a wrapped lifter, when you start getting that extra spinal loading, if you try to maintain the same volume and the same intensity on your deadlift, I think that's when you can kind of get like a lower back tweak potentially. So you got to be careful with that. Also, like this was your first time pulling sumo. So I thought that was, a challenge as well to kind of like learn that. So, I mean, I think everything kind of worked out really well. In terms of like, again, this is another thing that's maybe, I don't know if controversial is the right word, but I know there's still like a lot of schools of thought that think that you don't really need bands and chains and stuff like that. But anything in particular that you felt, like I said, it helps you recover or maybe helps, blast through a sticking point at the meet, in terms of like the exercise selection or anything like that? All right, so it looks like we lost Brad for a second. We're going to kind of keep rolling here.
Technical difficulty. Sorry.
It's good. We're all good.
All right.
So yeah, I was just kind of mentioning as far as any things like in terms of like maybe a session that clicked or like, we use a lot of like accommodating resistance bands and chains, anything that you felt like that was helpful or like, or maybe you could just kind of explain maybe some of the benefits in terms of like what you got out of some of those different exercises, or even just using accommodating resistance that you felt like was helpful, kind of getting ready for the meet.
Yeah. So this was, as soon as I started training with you guys was the first time I'd been exposed to the accommodating resistance. Because again, in commercial gyms, you don't really have the opportunity to use that kind of stuff. So, especially for the equipped prep that we did, I think that the chains and bands, the overload in the top portion, but allowing you that forgiveness in the bottom, because with both chains and bands, so you're overstimulating your nervous system. You're feeling the weight in the top, but you don't have that overload in the bottom like you would if you were just using straight weight the whole time. So I think as far as prepping my nervous system, the accommodating resistance was the ticket, because it allowed me to overload prior weeks to be ready for the jump that we were going to take the next week.
Yeah. And I think like something, obviously this is the first time you've like handled, a 700 plus squat. It was the first time. Now you're getting close to like around that 500-pound range on bench. So like, those are obviously all weights that you've never like had on your back or in your hands before. So I think being able to feel those weights, like multiple, and obviously like if we were to like, put 700 pounds in your back straight weight every session, that would probably not bode very well for your recovery and stuff. So I think having that, the unloading of your spine and in your shoulder joint is good. We were kind of talking about a little bit before the call. I think sometimes it could be hard, but rigging up like reverse bands, I think for bench press, I think also we did a lot of like, maybe not always full range, but very close to full range work. I think in your bench shirt, I think that's really important because people get really comfortable off boards. And maybe you could kind of talk about that a little bit. You get really comfortable off a 2 board, but it's a world of difference going from like the 1 board down to your chest. So, anything in particular in terms of like being patient, getting to depth in a squat, or like getting bench shirt weights to touch, like anything that you found helpful, or just listening to your training partners maybe, and kind of like, I don't know, like anything in particular that you felt like clicked in terms of whether it be squat depth, or because those are kind of two, I'd say if people kind of mess up anything on equipped lifting, it's either like not hitting depth in training or not touching in the bench shirt, and then they end up bombing at the meet. So any advice to people?
Yeah. So, I mean, a huge game changer for me this year has been number one, getting around the crew, but also, the amount that I've invested in my training, going out of my way to go to seminars, to go talk to Ed Cohen, to go talk to Brian Carroll, to go talk to these people that have done way more than I have, and to hit and listen to them actually, and then go back and, have you there to, hey, this is what they're saying. And, we went to a seminar with Ed Cohen together, and, you knew what I needed kind of looked at by him. And he gave me a couple of great cues. And like you said, this is the first time I pulled sumo. So, you get what you put into your training, both in the gym and out of the gym, right? If you're not, it's more than just here. But then, another thing with patience is we kind of had a target. You had a target for me. I didn't know what it was up until meet day. And I didn't even know then, really. I didn't bother myself with it. But we never missed a lift in the gym. Besides at the beginning, a couple missed grooves on the bench that we cleaned up right away. But, we never missed a lift in the gym. We didn't miss a lift on the platform. So that just goes to show, you know, patience with the weight, you know, worry about technique, and the weight will come, right? If you can learn the groove and learn the technique with the lightweight, then you should be able to keep with the heavyweight. So patience, you know, patience there was huge. And, you know, that was a lot of listening to the coach and the crew.
Yeah. I want to highlight a couple of things, whether you're a raw lifter or an equipped lifter or just strength training. So I think number one, if you're listening to a podcast like this, you're at a seminar, I think it's important to have like practical takeaways from what you learn. Cause I think a lot of people they'll consume information or they'll ask for advice, but then they don't actually implement the advice. It's like, if you don't implement the advice, it's like, what's the point? But at the same time, you don't want to throw out everything. So we had conversation. Hey, like this is what Eddie is saying. This is how I would apply it. So like, you got to be able to like take the information and then ultimately you have to like do what's right for you. Cause even I kind of played with a couple of things, that Eddie was saying, as well. And, you know, I just kind of tried it for a little bit, and you have to give it some time. I think he kind of mentioned trying something for kind of several months. But even for me over time, you know, working out with Jamal Browner and working out with some other people, seeing Eddie Cohen, you know, my sumo deadlift is still like not quite as good as it can be. I just got to work out with Mitchell Hooper, World's Strongest Man, the other day, and I think that's the best my conventional has ever looked. I hit a stiff bar deadlift PR, you know, for what it's worth. It's something, right? So and I haven't been training the deadlift. So yeah, I think it's good to rub elbows with people, but also like, you know, don't throw out everything that's been working, but try to like tweak it a little bit, and then keep adding to it and then make it your own. I think the patience is always a big one. Especially when it comes to powerlifting, what I see with a lot of young kids, like just because you can doesn't mean you should. So like you want to be careful. And this is kind of my rule of thumb. And I don't know if you kind of noticed this or not, but I was very careful about only increasing a certain amount of load each week. So if you start to kind of, usually 10% is kind of the number. So if you're like a 500 squatter and you throw on a squat suit, even if you could squat 600 in the squat suit, like I don't know if you remember, I didn't like have you were still below 5, which represents 10. And then we slowly ramped up because your spine needs to acclimate it. I've seen a lot of girls, like their forearms benching. They're not like ready. So their bones and their ligaments and their tendons are not like ready for it. So you got to be careful just because your muscles are able to produce a certain amount of force. There's the old saying, you know, you can't shoot a cannon from a canoe. So one of the things that we talked about before the call, your upper back, your trunk stability, there's going to be things that needs to be brought up. So your weaknesses can change when you get in the gear. Your hips might not be strong enough to pull sumo. Your hips might not be strong enough to keep the suit open, your hips open in the suit. Your upper back might not be strong enough to control. You got to steer that thing on the way down. You could be a 500-pound bencher. It doesn't mean that you're going to be a 700-pound bencher in a shirt. If your rotator cuff's weak, if your lats are weak, if your mid back and your traps are weak, or they're just not stable. So your raw strength, horsepower is always good, but if you don't have the stability to control that horsepower, it doesn't matter. And you see it time and time again, like even someone like Donnie Thompson, when Donnie Thompson, hit the world record total, in the super heavyweight class, 3,000, I'm pretty sure he pulled raw, 99% sure. So you guys could check that out, but, he couldn't get in a good position with the suit. So he just elected to pull raw. He was very strong. So he was able to, he didn't get anything out of a deadlift suit. So it's really important that you kind of understand that and you kind of figure out what works for you. But yeah, being patient, learning, taking action on that. But yeah, I think one of the things I just want to kind of highlight for equipped lifting, and I'm at the time of this recording, I'm getting ready for my next strict curl meet. I think what's cool about maybe doing raw lifting, raw with wraps, equipped lifting, especially as we get older. You've been lifting weights for a really long time. I've been competing since 2006. What's cool about these different categories, it allows you to maybe potentially extend your career, extend the amount of PRs you can do. So you mentioned Benny. Benny has done over 800 pounds in a multiply shirt. He's a family man now. He's got other responsibilities. He just elected to make a pivot. Now he's going single ply, and he's establishing new PRs and new records in single ply. So he's not lifting the absolute poundages that he was before, but he's able to still have powerlifting as part of his life, and he's able to kind of have some purpose to his training. So I think that's a really good example. He's a good example of someone that was still very high level, one of the best equipped, benches in his weight class. I believe he was, I could be wrong. It was either top 40 or top 20 all time, but it was very, very, very exceptional bench. So I think it's important that we're always kind of seeking challenges, and the challenges don't always have to be absolute poundage. So maybe you're a raw lifter listening to this and you feel like you're kind of, the juice isn't worth the squeeze to like eke out another 5 pounds. Maybe you try an equipped meet, maybe you do single ply. So I think that opening up the door and seeing these other possibilities, I'm kind of excited to see the sport grow. So I don't know if you want to add to that before we close out, but that's kind of how I'm like, especially look at, equipped lifting.
Yeah, I mean, that's one reason I jumped into it, right? I'm 40 years old. I've I probably had some more. I know I had more in me in raw. How much more, and what was it going to be the cost of it?
Yeah,
Is kind of what made my decision. Like if I could have increased my total by another 100 pounds or 120 pounds, and I think 1720 is what I needed for an elite raw total. Maybe I hit it in a meet, and maybe that's my last meet, right? I don't know, but I think that going equipped, I'll hit my elite total, and I'll have plenty of room to keep growing. So yeah, that's one reason why I went.
the other thing I'll say too with equipped lifting, I feel like it sounds funny because a lot of equipped lifters, we get kind of pigeonholed as like the fat guy in like the squat suit, but I always found that equipped lifting it feels more like a sport, because you could have a missed groove, like you said, and then you can kind of come back and smoke it. With raw, a lot of times, if you can't like hit the weight, there's not like a major technical change or an adjustment that you could make that's going to allow you to hit the lift. With equipped lifting, as you know, I could pull the shirt this way a little bit, pull the collar down, adjust the sleeve, get the strap a little tighter. There are things, and as a coach, that's kind of fun too. So I feel it's like more like the sport part of it seems more like exciting, and I think that's like it makes it more challenging, but you can be a more skillful lifter, and you don't necessarily have to get much stronger, but you can improve your skill, and improve your total, which I think is really cool. So
as soon as I started doing the equipped lifting, I felt like, I kind of broke down, looked at raw and equipped differently. And I said, raw was great for everybody. I love raw lifting and it's such an easy access into powerlifting for everybody. You can do it on your own. You can do it at any gym. It's low cost of entry. And then the equipped lifting is, I just, unfortunately, my time in Long Island came to an end, and I came home. Fortunately, I'm home now. I bought a monolift, and I'm going to put together a group of guys that I can train with every week, because I see the what a crew training does. I see the benefit in a crew. We push each other. You push each other. Everybody. It's a friendly, competition, and everybody gets stronger together.
Yeah, I think I just again before our call yesterday, I had like the Frank from Reps and Responders on, and I think for like, we can close with this. I think for men especially, but women too. I think that like a lot of the quote unquote like manly activities of like drinking beers and eating chicken wings, watching the football game, and not to say that squatting 800 pounds is healthy by any means, but I do think meeting at the squat bar is a better alternative than meeting at the bar and slamming down a bunch of beers, getting fat and sick. I think that what I love about the crew more than anything, I do think that you kind of increase your longevity in terms of like, it's more sustainable having that support. But I think like having that camaraderie, having that like kind of brotherhood, having that like friendship, those bonds, that's something that Eddie Cohen talked about a lot. Like you kind of remember the relationships, how people treated you. Those are the things you got to remember more so than like the individual lifts and the numbers. You're going to remember the time that you hit, like, you're going to remember those milestones, but you're going to remember like the crew that was there, that was spotting you and things like that, and how they treated you, who wrapped your knees. And maybe if you had like a silly mishap or something, or, you know, something funny happened in training, or whatever the case may be. I think that's really important to have that crew of guys, that, cause, you know, and it's, like I said, it's coming from a positive place. You're all trying to get better. You're all trying to grow together. So I think just as young men that are listening to this, it's really important, whether you lift equipped or not, training with a crew of guys. And again, I think that there's nothing wrong with training solo if that's your thing, but I really like the crews to be, you know, more, I guess, mainstream, for lack of, or at least more accessible to people. And I wish more people would do it. It's something that we're trying to encourage here in Delaware as well. So yeah, we'll just kind of leave it at that. So any parting final words, Brad, before we close out?
No, I'm just, you know, I'm on a little bit of a hiatus right now, and I'm gonna put on a little bit more muscle and get ready for the next one. So looking forward to it. Future's big.
I appreciate you coming on. It's really exciting to see your transition, and, you know, we're excited to see what you do in the future. If you guys found this episode helpful, please give it a 5-star review. It helps other people find us. Until next time, stay strong, and we'll see you soon.